Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to get going. We need to be efficient with our time today because rules will be convening at 9, which probably means we'll start seeing members come in around 8:55. I want to welcome everybody to the House Appropriations Education Subcommittee budget hearing for the FY22 budget. You should have in front of you the agenda. If you do not, we're going to first hear from Dr. Evans with the TRS, then we're going to hear from Commissioner Jacobs with DECAL, and then we are going to hear from the DOE, and that's going to be the CFO, and also from the Georgia Virtual School. Before we get going, I'd like to ask Representative Cantrell, if you could, please open us up in prayer.
Okay, let's pray together. Lord, today we come once again recognizing our complete and utter dependence upon you. Would you please give us wisdom as we meet today and help us to make good decisions for Georgia? In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Representative Cantrell. I'd like to just remind everyone who is online right now, please just let us know by raising your hand if you have a question after any of the speakers. We'll make sure that we get that answered, and then want to make sure that everyone knows that this is being recorded, so just in case you need to be able to go back and get some additional information. So what I'd like to do is kick off and go right into Dr. Evans. And Dr. Evans, if you could come up here to the podium, please. We did a little bit of a shift on you due to the need of the folks that are on Zoom, so sorry about that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be able to come share with you a little bit about the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia. I am Buster Evans, Director of Retirement System, and we primarily serve over 400,000 educators all across the state of Georgia. The majority of those come from the K-12 world, but a large number also come from the university system, some of our libraries, our county extension agents, our technical colleges, and even some other state agencies where our members work across the state. That breaks down in terms of membership. We have approximately 137,000 beneficiaries, and we have about 237,000 active contributing members. And those numbers are important because we have almost 2 times as many people working and contributing into the system compared to those who are getting benefits. You'll see sometimes plans almost have a 1-to-1 ratio, but fortunately in Georgia, we do have a much larger number of active contributors than we do beneficiaries. Oftentimes people ask the question, why do we have a retirement system, a defined benefit retirement system in Georgia? Well, for years it's been recognized that it has 2 impacts on the education profession. Recruitment, people coming into the profession, they may realize they may not make as much money, but they have an outstanding benefit in the long term if they stay in the profession. And that is the other thing. First of all, recruitment, and then secondly, retention. And that is not just true for our K-12 teachers, but it's also true especially true for our colleges and universities who are actually competing for professors to come from all across the country. So when maybe some of your colleagues, or maybe you've asked the question from time to time, why we have a defined benefit plan, it's policy to impact recruitment, policy to impact retention. As I said, 237,000 actives, 137,000 contributors. The average monthly benefit of all of our retirees is approximately $3,300 a month. And I love this particular statistic. And because we have, while the average retiree is retiring at approximately the age of 59, we have over the age of 85 years of age, we've got 8,500. Now, of those over 100 years of age, we have 81. Now, I've asked one day how many of those over 100 were men, and we had to look it up, but right now we only have 1 over the age of 100. So interesting statistic, and I'm committed to that's a goal that I hope to be able to achieve at some point in my life. Let me tell you a little bit about the fiscal year 2020 data. It was quite an interesting year and somewhat of a real roller coaster. We began the year 2020 with a pretty strong market, and then COVID came along, and you know what happened. I can remember very clearly on March the 23rd, after our assets had dropped from about $85 billion down to around $60 billion, it was not a pleasant time, not knowing what the future looked like. But we actually ended the year pretty good. We closed out the fiscal year at a 5.42% return, which we, considering where we had come from, we thought that was quite good. When we look nationally, we asked the question, how well did we do? And this is largely because of our asset allocation and our asset mix that we had. But the average of all pension systems across the country was about a mean of about 3.1% return. So we felt like with a 5.42% return that was actually a very, very good success given the volatility that we had experienced through that time. That 5.42% return is based on, compared to our annual assumed rate of return, of which we just lowered last year from 7.5 down to 7.25. And understand that when you lower that assumed rate of return, it's a more conservative approach because it assumes you're not going to get as much money, which should help long-term sustainability. Now, the impact of lowering, however, that assumed rate of return always has a pressure pushing up that employer contribution rate. So some people will say, well, why don't you lower it even lower? Well, in time, we certainly may do that, but we also realize it has a greater impact on our employers, including especially the state of Georgia, because you fund over 50% of that employer contribution rate. We have, so $5.2 billion is paid out each year in Georgia, and I'll refer to this later, but I gave you a copy of our economic impact brochure that talks about where that money goes all across the state, and you can, we'll look at maybe a couple of examples from that later on. Our fund sits at approximately 77% funding ratio. That is not where exactly we would like for it to be. It has been trending upward, but there were times approximately 20 years ago when we were over 90% funded and even close to 100% funded. But it has been shifting upward. In 2012, we adopted what we refer to as a closed amortization scale or schedule to pay off that unfunded accrued liability. Georgia's teachers' retirement system continues to have, at this point in time, approximately $23 billion in unfunded accrued liability. Because of that closed amortization scale, however, though, by the year 2042, that unfunded accrued liability will be paid off and will be down to zero. Once that happens, you'll see our UAL cost disappear, and then the cost to our employer rate will be a much more manageable, under 10% rate compared to the 19.81% that we will be paying for fiscal year 2022. As you look at our contribution rates again for fiscal year 2022, our funds come largely from three different sources. First of all, the largest amount of our funding comes from returns on our investments. But our employees, by law, pay between 5 and 6%. Currently, that rate is set at 6%. And our employer contribution rate for fiscal year 2022 will be 19.81%. Now, that is up a little bit from 19.04%. But that is down from last year when we were actually at 21.14%. So we feel like we're in a pretty stable area. We do not, if you look at our actuarial projections, we do not see that number jumping up. But key to that is every year ensuring that we meet our assumed rate of return. Today, our assets sit at well, as of in your report, as of June 30th, or excuse me, December 30th, they were at $93.9 billion. I am extremely pleased to be able to tell you this morning that as of today, we have cracked $97 billion in assets. Our year-to-date return for calendar year through December was over 15%. Our fiscal year-to-date return is now approximately 21%. So we've had an amazing year. If we could only hold on and finish this year at that kind of rate, when I'm down here in a couple of years from now, you're going to see what kind of impact that has made. We don't like to get overly excited about that when we've got great returns, because we also know that there's going to be a time that I'm going to stand before you and it's not going to be that good. But looking long term, we certainly know that if we could end this year with some good double-digit returns, it would look a lot better when we're planning those employer contribution rates 2 years down the line. Let me share with you 4 trends that we've noted during the past year that we think are somewhat COVID-related. First of all, as I said, despite the horrific dip in assets in March, we finished the calendar year in good standing, and that's good. And again, we hope to finish the fiscal year that way as well. The second trend that we've noticed is our retirement rate. Initially, we were hearing projections, and we were hearing people all across the country talk about increased number of retirements. When all was said and done at the end of June, we actually had fewer retirements for the ending of the fiscal year than we did in any time in the previous several years. Now, we think there are 2 reasons that played into that. One of the biggest reasons we think is the $3,000 pay raise that the governor and you funded for teachers. That keeps people in the profession, particularly because as they work an additional 3 years, that money goes into being calculated for their highest 24 months average salary. So I think that's one of the reasons why we saw fewer retirements. The second thing that we also believe happened is that because of the uncertainty in many job areas, educators are generally seen as having a pretty secure employment. And so maybe their family members, or they might have had a husband or wife who didn't have that type of security, so they held on to their jobs during that period of time. Now, what we have seen, and we're tracking this on a month-to-month basis, we have seen since the month of August, every month an increase in the retirements that we're seeing. I think by the time that we see the end of the year come, it's probably going to end up being a wash between last year and this year. But again, I think it was very critical for the profession that pay raise came at a very, very good time to keep educators in the classroom and working. The third trend that we are seeing is what we call fewer account refunds. That means somebody's leaving the profession and they're taking their contributions with them. And again, I would like to think that there are a couple of reasons for that happening. Certainly the pay raise could, again, be one of those types of things. But I think also, again, people felt secure. Educators felt that job employment was a good place to be. And so they're staying there. And hopefully that's going to help our school systems as they experience shortages in some ways. A fourth trend, and this one is not one of the pleasant trends, we have seen an increase every month since March, a year-over-year increase in death rates among our beneficiaries. We began to track that rate as I would hear about former colleagues of mine from all across the state who were passing away, and people were calling in, and we said, you know what, we need to be tracking this. And it would be expected because our beneficiaries are largely older. Many of them, as I've indicated, above 70 and 80 years of age. But we have seen increases in our death rates among retirees. The last trend that I'll share with you, and you guys are already working to do something in regards to this, we've seen fewer of our retirees want to go back to work in the classroom. It's just, and that's being a stressor on our school systems right now as they are in need. I was just speaking with a representative of a school district earlier this morning, and he was sharing that they can't get substitutes. And when they have teachers who are out or maybe having to be quarantined or have tested positive for COVID, getting teachers. So it's a real struggle to be able to match. And some districts have actually had to, that was part of the decision for them not to continue to have face-to-face school because they didn't have enough staff. I know that one of the pieces of legislation that you will be looking at in the General Assembly will be, I believe, House Bill 385, which is a part of the governor's teacher pipeline return package. That is a return to work bill that would allow certain retired educators to come back and work in the classroom as well. So those are 5 trends that we've seen. We'll continue to track these because we think it's important for our agency. We think it's important for education policy in the state of Georgia. The last thing that I would share with you, and I think Sarah passed one of these to each of you. As I indicated earlier, each year we pay about $5.2 billion to our beneficiaries. That money goes all across the state of Georgia and beyond. You have a list here of how it impacts counties that you live in, and my former county, Forsyth County, we can see that nearly $65 billion goes into that community each year to 1,727 beneficiaries, while over 5,885 active workers continue to work. Where I live now in the beautiful county of Monroe County, we have over $17 million goes into a smaller county like that. And I like to remind people that money shows up in some unique places. It shows up in church offering plates, it's mom and pop businesses, Walmart and doctor's offices, and to pay taxes. So while we are not an economic impact organization, the benefits that we do pay do go back to help support businesses all across this great state of Georgia. Mr. Chairman, that's conclude my remarks, but if you or any of your members have any questions, we'd certainly be delighted to try to answer them if we can.
Dr. Evans, first of all, thank you. We had asked you to go through and really exhaust what COVID had done to the pension system, what are the trends that you saw and your staff saw, and we appreciate you giving them to us in such a concise manner. I think you painted a really good picture so that we can understand what's happening with TRS. There are some questions, so I'd like to recognize Representative Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your no-nonsense report, Dr. Evans, so that folks like me can even understand what you're saying. You kind of alluded to this in one of your trends, but I wanted to ask the question a little more directly. Do you see any trends with the new teachers, the teachers that have served 5 or less years, hanging around more, or is that, are we still losing them at a similar rate as previously?
Great. Obviously, that's been a struggle for the profession for a number of years, is that we lose, I think the number is about 40%. I think the only statistic that we gather from that is the fact that when we have fewer refunds, that means that's fewer of those people who 10 years or less are leaving. So whether or not they're specifically within 5 years, I can't tell you that for sure, but certainly we're seeing fewer of those with 10 years or less leaving the profession.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Representative Cantrell. Right now, we don't have any other questions, and we don't have members online. Real quick, Dr. Evans. Oh, excuse me. We do have another question. Sorry. Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for the delay in hitting the button. Just a quick question in regards to the shortage of teachers in the classroom, teacher of record in the classroom. Right now, I could be mistaken, maybe help me out here, there requires a 4-year degree to be a substitute teacher, is that correct?
No, there's not a degree requirement to serve as a substitute teacher, excepting if you're going to be filling perhaps in a long term in a place where you've got to have that certification, but there's not a certification or degree requirement for substitutes.
Does that vary county to county, district to district, or is that the standard rule?
That's true across the entire state of Georgia.
Okay, I'll go back and do my research, because I think I read something the other day in regards to substitute teachers having to have a 4-year degree. And my suggestion was going to be, if that is true, that we should lower that to 2 years of college education. Because they're not the teacher of record. They're restricted and limited in what they can do in the classroom and not do for how long they can. So that could hopefully mitigate if it's true.
Yeah, Representative, I can tell you based on my past experiences, it is not a requirement. Obviously, substitutes with a degree is certainly a fantastic resource for school systems, but according to state law, I believe high school education is what is required, and then the substitute teacher training that is required to be able to do that. Yes.
Thank you, Representative Glanton. Dr. Evans, one very quick question, because I know we're on a tight timeline. I know that I believe we started to give a little bit more liberty in terms of alternative investments. Could you possibly give the committee in 60 seconds or less, has that been an extra arrow in your quiver? Has that been something that you guys have just kept on the sideline? Could you maybe give us a thought in terms of the execution of that?
Yes, absolutely. That legislation was passed last year, allowing Teachers Retirement System of Georgia to invest up to 5% of its total assets in alternative investments. We were one of the only funds in the nation that we looked at that did not have an opportunity to invest in alternatives. Our plan is to allocate each year up to 1% until we get to the 5%. I think your term is exactly right. It is an extra quiver, an extra tool for us to use as we find appropriate, but it's not something we're going to rush in. Sometimes the market lends itself being more suitable to enter into the alternatives than others, but it will be an opportunity that we take advantage of as our managers see it appropriate.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. We don't have any more questions. We sure do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right. In the spirit of time management, I'm going to go ahead and ask Commissioner Jacobs to go. Commissioner Jacobs is online and ready? Sure. All right. So we're going to go ahead and ask Commissioner Jacobs to go ahead and start. Commissioner Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the chair.
Okay. Thank you. And good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Decal is page 1, section 22 of your tracking sheet. And our first changes are in the pre-kindergarten program, which is section 22.3. Our first change is 22.3.1, which is a statewide change to reflect an adjustment in the employer share for the TRS system. It's an increase of $602,706,000. And the next change is 22.3.2, and this is an increase in formula funds for training and experience for pre-K teachers of $1,474,848. And this is similar to the T&E that is funded for K-12 teachers based on years of experience and degree. So we do the same type increase for Georgia pre-K teachers. Those are all the budget changes that Decal has in this budget, but of course I'm happy to take any questions from the committee or Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any questions right now, Commissioner Jacobs. Did you want to go through any type of, I'll say, qualitative presentation now?
I can tell you a little bit about what things are looking like in early learning in Georgia. So we are seeing that specifically for Georgia pre-K, that enrollment is down. I don't think that is specific to Georgia. We're seeing that nationally, not only in pre-K, but I'm also understanding that's in kindergarten. We did provide 3 options for Georgia pre-K this year, and we allowed the programs to decide what would be best for their families. And so we provided your traditional face-to-face option, which 65% of our classrooms are doing that traditional model, so your traditional face-to-face classroom. We also have a hybrid option where it could be a hybrid, obviously a virtual distance model and a traditional face-to-face model. 10% of our classrooms have chosen that model. And we've also offered a complete 100% distance model, and 25% of our classrooms have chosen that 100% distance model. So even when we offered these 3 models, we do see a decrease in enrollment. We are a little bit concerned with what that could cause with those critical skills that students do learn in Georgia pre-K. Our research shows over and over again that Georgia pre-K does prepare children for kindergarten. So we do have a summer transition program that has been around for over a decade. It's a 6-week program that we offer in the summer. We have two models. One is a rising pre-K, and that's for Spanish-speaking students that need a 6-week program before they even enter pre-K. But we also have a rising kindergarten program, and that's a 6-week program that we offer to students that have either completed pre-K and need additional services. Maybe they were on a wait list. Maybe they did not have a full year because they moved. Whatever the circumstances, they've been identified as needing 6 weeks of extra school before they enter kindergarten. And so, of course, we will be offering the summer transition program again this summer. And what we are hoping is that we can actually increase enrollment in that program. Now, summer transition is not nearly as large as pre-K, We offer about 3,500 slots, and so we are hoping that we can recruit more pre-K providers this year to offer that program, because even in 6 weeks, our research shows us that it makes a difference in skill attainment. And so we're hoping that we can help to catch some of those students up that either didn't attend or in that distance or hybrid model this summer, to make sure they are prepared for kindergarten. I'll also just tell you just quickly, since we do license childcare in Georgia, we have about 4,500 licensed programs in Georgia. And what we've seen, the good news is about 96% of them report to us that they are open. That has increased since March, when the pandemic began, when only 30% were open. So we are seeing a steady increase in programs that are open. But what we are seeing is that their enrollment is down. So their enrollment on average statewide is down about 25%. When we look at last year's enrollment compared to, we asked them this question in December of 2020. And so they're open, they are safe, they're doing an excellent job of making sure that they are providing healthy and safe environment for these children, not only to learn and get those foundational skills, but for also their parents to work. So it is open and accessible, but we do know that enrollment is down. I will also mention that we have provided and developed many different resources for families if they are choosing to keep their children out of early learning or pre-K at this time. We have offered a Georgia Pre-K at Home model, where there are very simple activities that parents can do with their children at home to keep those skills, learning those skills. We also have toddler time for younger children. And then, of course, as we always offer, summer resources, so that the skills that they do learn during the normal school year, that they can maintain and be ready for that next school year. That's very brief, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of other things I could update you on, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. Right now, we don't have any questions, just 2 quick ones from the chair. First, how do you guys publicize that 6-week summer program? I'm kind of embarrassed to say I didn't know about that, and I thought I pretty much had decal down. So I will go ahead and say, I'm not sure if my colleagues knew about it, but maybe if you could tell us very quickly how you advertise that across the state. And the second thing is, as we start to see the learning gap, do we have any data, hard data, in terms of what's the gap, and then what are some of the techniques that we can be using to close that gap? So 2 questions.
Okay, yes, sir. So on the summer transition program, it is open to all existing pre-K programs. So we have 3,800 classrooms around the state, so they are all welcome to apply for this program. It is an application process because it's not as large. We did a webinar with all of those programs last week, so they should know about it. And our application for that program opens on February 22nd. And so if they're interested, and we surely hope they do, and anyone in your district that's already a pre-K provider can absolutely apply to offer the summer transition program this summer. It's an excellent program. It provides even additional services to families as well. And so application for that is February 22nd. As far as the learning gap, we don't have any solid data on that, because we don't track student outcomes at that level for young children. We definitely are concerned, because we know that children could be missing some of those critical skills that they get early in those years. I will say, we thought at DECAL, our resources are very important, but also we've got to continue to provide access to those programs, so that when parents are ready to send those children back. Of course, the summer transition program is one of those access points. We've made some changes to our subsidy policy, our CAPS program that provides financial assistance for families with low income to help them afford childcare, so that there's no interruption in that benefit. If a parent loses their job, or maybe they have a reduction in hours due to COVID, we want to make sure that they still have that financial assistance. And then also in the access area, quality rated is how we rate programs that are going above and beyond our basic health and safety licensing requirements. And so even during the pandemic, when programs are closed or seeing a lot of changes in their teachers and their students attending, we've continued to rate programs. So quality rated programs are still accessible throughout their state. I believe since March, we've rated over 500 programs and added that to our number of quality rated programs, which were up about to 3,000, I believe, statewide. So those are some of the ways that we are helping to provide access to this. I will say there's also early Head Start and Head Start programs that slots are available statewide. That's not a program that DECAL administers. That's federal to local. that's also an additional program for students specifically of low income.
Thanks, Commissioner Jacobs. We sure do appreciate it. We don't have any questions from the floor right now, so we sure do appreciate it. Have a great day, and we are going to go ahead and transition now to the DOE, who I believe is virtual, and that's going to be Russ Rome and Keith Osborne. I do not know who's going to go first, so I'll go ahead and hand the floor to you, and please go ahead and start, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm Russ Rome, the Chief Financial Officer. I appreciate the opportunity to present the 2022 Governor's recommended budget. I'll go through the tracking sheet, and then our CIO, Dr. Keith Osborne, has a virtual learning presentation for everybody. I'll be starting in our agricultural education program, page 2, section 24.1. 24.1.1, as Dr. Evans noted during his presentation, you'll see this throughout our budget and our various programs, but there is an increase for the adjustment to the employer's share of the teacher's retirement system to 19.81%. In 24.1.3, very similar to our 21 amended budget, the 22 has austerity restorations of around 60% in our various programs. So in our agricultural education program, this results in $505,727. Down to our communities and schools program, 24.5.1, you'll see another austerity restoration of about $85,686. Our next program is the GNETS, or Georgia Network for Educational and Therapeutic Support. 24.8.3 is another 60% austerity restoration. This is about $3,669,000. The next one is 24.8.4. There's a reduction in formula funds for enrollment and T&E. During my 21 amended presentation, I talked about the and in joint there was a $36,000 FTE drop, or 36,000 FTE drop in our October counts. Well, in 21 amended, these the dollars were held harmless, but this in the 22 budgets where we start to see the effect of some of these enrollment declines. So you'll note in that line there's a decline of about $3.3 million. Our next one is the non-quality basic education formula grants program, 24.11.2. We have the austerity restoration for our feminine hygiene grants. Now will be $420,000, which brings it back up to $720,000, similar to the 21 amended budget. 24.11.3, we have residential treatment facilities reduction based on attendance of about $846,116. And then our sparsity grants has another enrollment decline of about $44,000. Our next program, preschool disability services, 24.13.2. We've got a reduction of based on enrollment of about $4,887,959. And then we have in 24.13.3, we are another austerity restoration of about $2.5 million. In our pupil transportation program, 24.14.1, we have an increase of formula growth for about 41 districts, resulting in about $179,181. In equalization program, 24.15.1, you'll see a increase of about $71,919,000. And this is, formula driven. When the tax digest goes up, equalization typically goes up, and it also affects our next program, 24.16.1, local 5 mil share typically increases, which it shows as a reduction, but this is an increase in the local 5 mil share of $111,838,943. Our next big program, QBE, 24.17. You'll see that TRS increase to 19.81. This is where you'll see the biggest increase in our budget of $57,319,000. 24.17.2. This is the declining enrollment number based on that 36K FTE reduction that we saw in October's count of 166,085,556. One thing I think it's important to note here is that if the students come back in FTEs in our March and October count do increase, this number could be reduced. It may not be as high as the 166. It can't go lower, but there can be based on the way the formula works. 24.17.3, we have an increase for T&E and health insurance of around 113 million. We've got 24.17.5, we've got an increase for state commission charter school supplement. This is for 6 new schools of about $36,239,000. We've got, I think a very important one is 24.17.6. Based on the current formula and with the enrollment declines, there would have resulted in a little over $1 million cut to school nurses, but the governor's recommended budget is holding them harmless and not recommending this cut, and we're very thankful for that. 24.17.7, we've got a reduction for newly certified math and science teachers of about 893,000. And then the big one in QBE 24.17.8, we've got the austerity restoration amount of about 60%, which is the $567,546,563. In 24.18, our regional education service agencies, or our RESAs, we've got a reduction based on the enrollment decline, 24.18.2, of about $337,465. And then in 24.18.3, we have our austerity restoration of $889,508. Next is our state schools program, 24.21.3. We've got a formula fund increase for T&E of about $211,362. And then in 24.21.4, we have the austerity restoration of $300,000. Our CTAE program, 24.22.3, we've got austerity restoration for our extended day year, vocational supervisors, industry certification, and youth apprenticeship programs of $674,000. Our testing program, 24.23.2, we're asking for an increase of about 5.3 million. This is to restore the funding for the Georgia milestones and allow us to perform the tests in the school year that are within federal requirements. And one thing I'd like to note there is, you probably saw it sprinkled throughout the budget, is part of our transition to a remote workforce. The agency reduced our footprint at the towers, and in doing so, we had a little over $1 million in rental savings. Of that amount, about $633,000 is attributable to state funds, and this portion is being taken out of the other programs and moved in as part of the restoration for Georgia milestones. Our last program that had a significant change is in our tuition for multiple disability students, 24.24.1, and they had an austerity restoration as well of about $93,117. And that concludes the budget changes. Chairman, I can answer questions, or we can go right to Dr. Osborne for a virtual learning presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Rome, we do have a question. Well, actually, we have questions on a recognized Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The members of the committee, probably like me, they've been getting a lot of emails from the residential treatment facilities about the cut there. It's my understanding those students are not there by choice, but they're placed there. Has there been that dramatic a reduction in attendance in those facilities?
Yeah, I think, Matt, are you on here? Carter? I know he deals with the residential treatment facilities pretty.
Yes, I am.
Oh, there he is. Sorry.
Hey, good morning. So, yes, most of that is enrollment decline. As you said, Chairman Nix, they are not it's not voluntary, but the formula itself is done purely by the enrollment.
Okay. One more question. And I know that there's always been a discussion about when that is done, when that enrollment is taken. Is there any opportunity for them to go back and get some of those funds if indeed their enrollment changes?
Russ, I'll let you speak to that with amended budgets and hold harmless type deal. One thing I will mention as well, Chairman Nix, is that we have put some CARES funding towards residential treatment centers. Actually, this month at the State Board of Education meeting, we will put some of the CARES funding towards those residential treatment centers, similar to the way we did with some of our other program line items.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, Mr. Rome, would you happen to know approximately, Mr. Cardoza just referred to federal CARES money going into the residential treatment centers, and to Chairman Nix's question, would you happen to know approximately what the state board will be voting on in terms of the amount of money going to them?
Yeah, I believe, Matt, if I'm not mistaken, was it about, what was the cut? It was around 300, was it 300 or 265,000?
It's a little over 350,000.
300, okay, a little over 350,000.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I believe we're taking it to the board this month.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this report, Mr. Rome. On Chairman Nix stole my first question, but my second question on the QBE funding mechanism there, that 60% restoration of the 10% cut. Is that the same number that we used in the amended budget for last year? That 500?
Yes, sir.
Is it?
Yeah, it all affected the 21 base. It was the total austerity that was applied to the 21 base budget. So when they restored 60%, it would be the same number going for both.
Now, are we anticipating CARES Act money to go into this from the feds as well for the QBE funding?
Now I don't anticipate, or I don't know of any funding specifically like the ARA funds that we received years past that actually went towards a stabilization for a specific austerity cut. The CARES Act 1 and 2 that we've seen were distributed based on Title I formula allocations.
So if someone were to ask me, how far short are we from, quote unquote, fully funding QBE, what would be the answer that you would give?
I believe we're about 4%. The austerity is around 4.09, I believe is the true number, is what the austerity is.
So it's
right
like
now.
It's like about 370 million, like it was last year before the CARES funding kicked in.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cantrell. Mr. Rome, we don't have any more questions for you, and I'm going to go ahead and take the privilege from the chair. And Dr. Osborne, I hate to do this, but I'm going to ask you to come back next week to our second and final hearing. I think what you need to discuss from a virtual school standpoint is so important, and we need to leave this room in about 10 minutes. And my feeling is between your presentation and the Q&A, we need a bit more than 10 minutes. So Dr. Osborne, I apologize for that, but hopefully we can arrange for you to come back next week. So Mr. Rome, thank you so much. Are there any other questions or concerns from the committee? If not, what I'd like to announce is we're going to go ahead next week. We will get the invitation out to you in terms of who's going to be speaking. We're going to go ahead and start with Dr. Osborne so we can get the virtual education information that we need. We believe that given what we have seen with COVID, I'll say the impetus has never been higher to ensure that we have different modalities for our students, may it be physical, hybrid, or virtual. The second thing that we're definitely going to be doing next week is getting public comment And we want to encourage everyone, if there is a comment that you would like to make, be sure to coordinate with my office, and we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to do that either physically or virtually. So until then, I appreciate everyone's time, and we stand adjourned.